open episode 7, not from where episode 6 left off, but instead in the desert at an unspecified time, probably either morning or evening. We pan over one man wearing worn out NCR Ranger gear, searching near a single lone building for anything metal in the sand. Finding a token, he waves to a second one wearing a similar outfit, and apparently content with their haul, they leave the area. Based on what they are carrying, they have found a very small haul, and the younger of the pair pours out the metal they've recovered into a metal pot on a fire for reasons certainly not smelting, as the temperature is not even close to high enough from an open flame to melt iron. Anyway, they both go inside their scrap wood shack, and Ghoul Howard is sitting there having a meal. The older man calls for Sandra a couple of times, while Ghoul Howard stares at him and eats some meat. This is supposed to make you think that Ghoul Howard has killed and eaten Sandra, because a few episodes back he cannibalized another ghoul because, to quote, "sometimes a fella's gotta eat a fella." But it's a fake out, because Sandra walks in from off screen with a glass of water. Clearly the rules of not existing if not in the frame are still in effect, as the scrap shack is small enough that she would have easily heard her name being called. Regardless, Ghoul Howard plays this clearly staged event off for laughs, as if the older man thought that Ghoul Howard, a man who eats other men, would have eaten his daughter. The very notion of the idea. Anyway, Sandra is sent outside and exits the show. Ghoul Howard calls the man a lead farmer, at the very least giving a reason for the poor quality smelting operation outside, and claims he is after information. The man agrees, and Ghoul Howard starts putting the screws to him for some reason. Turns out the man had two sons, Tommy, the one farming with him, and Rufus, who went to work with the mysterious mad woman. Ghoul Howard starts laying out the dots. Rufus sent Tommy some caps in order to pay a courier to transport an Enclave defector, aka Wilzig, to the mad woman, aka Lee Moldava. This is a plot convenience. There is, as far as we are aware, no reason as to why Rufus could not do this himself, as this means that Lee Moldava's plan was to get Rufus to pay his brother, to pay Marjune, to pay an unnamed courier in Philly, to transport Wilzig to the observatory, and all that, as far as I can tell, over the course of 2 days, as you saw Wilzig leave the Enclave very suddenly, almost as if it was unplanned, during the day, then at night with Lucy, then the next day outside of the bear den, and then into Philly. Either way, Rufus is apparently dead off screen, as the two sheriffs shot last episode were Rex and Troy, with their boss Saul, and Ghoul Howard wants to know where Lee Moldava is. So, whoever this Rufus character is, they exist purely for plot convenience. Or existed, I should say. Perhaps he was Schrodinger's character, both alive and dead at the same time, until Ghoul Howard mentioned him. Who knows? Regardless of that, Tommy does that trope of not giving the information requested, but rather explaining why he took the aforementioned money, which his father does not care about, and demands Tommy to spill the beans. After a tense few moments, Tommy drops the location, and his father asks Ghoul Howard to leave. However, Ghoul Howard is a dick, and provokes Tommy, knowing full well that he is all but immune to bullets, thanks to what we have been shown in the Philly gunfight. So the only reason he is doing this is for the sheer thrill of getting the chance to shoot someone. Tommy snaps, goes for a gun, and gets blasted in the heart for it, because Ghoul Howard was, as previously mentioned, just waiting for him to make a move so he could shoot someone. With the information in hand and grieving father on the floor, Ghoul Howard leaves the shack. Cut to Ghoul Howard walking in the sands, clearly not just after the previous scene, as Scrap Shack is not behind him. He takes his antiferal drug, and we switch to the pre-war communist meeting. Lee Moldava is giving a talk about how America is not what was promised, and the American dream is dead. She states they have more in common with the Red Chinese than they do with their own government, at which point Cooper Howard has had enough and goes to leave. Lee Moldava belittles him, to which he says he has his principles. Of note here is that he calls her Miss Williams, which would explain fairly well how he does not connect the name Lee Moldava to the face on the government's bounty board. She changed her name. Does not explain, however, how she's over 200 years old, but that is by the by. Cooper goes to leave, but Lee Moldava does not let him. She sees an easy target and attacks, asking how much he was paid by Vault-Tec to work with them. He does not give a figure and instead says they're a sponsor and he earns a living. She snaps back that with Vault-Tec being the largest company of America, and there must be a lot of money in selling the end of the world. I would guess that she intended to mean the idea of the end of the world, as in a country at war with a nuclear power. It is highly profitable to sell shelters to the general population in the event of a nuclear exchange, so that they get to survive. It is like insurance, but instead of getting a replacement car, you get to live. Regardless, Cooper hits back by saying there is a lot of money in selling an ideology that ends in breadlines. White Knife gets embarrassed and tries to usher Cooper out, but Lee Moldava twists the knife just a little more, saying she knows Barbara, and perhaps better than Cooper does himself. After the very frosty end of the meeting, Cooper and Lee Moldava are walking away together. He asks how she knows Barbara, and she says that her research company was developing cold fusion, an infinite energy source, and claims that it's hard to monetize, which is bollocks. Because you see, when it comes to physical things, the value of an object is determined by how rare it is. The same with money itself. The more of it there is, the cheaper it becomes. However, electricity is not a physical object, and much like other non-physical things, can have a value assigned to it by the company that owns it. In fact, all they would have to do is sell it for slightly cheaper than their competition, and everybody would flock to them, very swiftly giving them a near 100% market share. Not to mention that, from a law perspective, this is a time when uranium and petroleum are in such high demand that countries are going to war just to acquire them. An infinite energy source would make the owning company the richest one on the planet. Anyway, Lee Moldava says that she was on the brink of completing it, then Vault-Tec purchased every company she had worked for. Now, she does raise a good point here that Vault-Tec essentially purchased the ability to end the war that's been going on for nearly 10 years, with the implication that the company invested is maintaining fear. It would be in their best interest to ensure that nobody else could take that away from them. However, as previously stated, they could now end that war themselves, keep all the profits from the Vault program by spinning it as people buying life insurance, and then provide power to every nation on Earth, thus becoming the richest company on Earth. Keep that in mind. Just because something is free to make does not mean it has almost be free to sell. With the pitch concluded, Lee Moldava hands Cooper a bug in order to get him to spy on Barbara. An odd move for someone who claims to know more about her than their own husband, but whatever, I guess. He goes to hand it back, but she insists he keep it, as she knows she's gotten her hooks into him. She then finishes the conversation with, "I'm not a communist, Mr. Howard. That's just a dirty word they use to describe people who aren't insane." Which is itself insane, as America has been at war for 10 years with communist China, who invaded Alaska in order to get at its resources, and will continue to be at war with them right up until August 2077. Nope, Lee Moldava is a person who is motivated by anger here. She is a person who has had her life's work taken away from her by corporate America and has lashed out by taking on the ideology of what she sees as their enemy, Communist China. And as her eyes, America are the bad guys, that must make the Chinese the good guys. With the intro over, we jump to Vault 4, lingering on the lab. Oh no, what could this mean? Has the captured Lucy been put in one of the tubes? Is she being experimented on by someone who knows too much? No, she's just getting lectured by Overseer Benjamin and the cult lady about how she just had to go to level 12 after all they had done for her. Never mentioned to her why she was not allowed on level 12, and forgetting the whole cult of blood and ashes that worshipped the woman who came into Lucy's home, killed a significant number of her friends and neighbours, kidnapped her dad, and blew up a doorway to Vault 32. Lucy quite rightly points out that what was going on here was sick, and Cult Lady says she needs to see the holotape. Benjamin relents, and they play the tape that had brought along with them because they always intended for her to see it, I guess. Or maybe it's a fixture there. The way he reacts, he did not want to show it, so why do they have it with them? Also, it would have cleared up a lot of confusion if she had been told when initially inquiring about level 12, look, it was an experimental level from the first Overseer. We keep it contained to make sure nothing like that ever happens again. Here's a tape to show what they used to do. We cut to the tape showing Mr. Hawthorne from the start of the previous episode in a panic and exclaiming that he may be about to die, but goes on to double down on his belief that a society governed by scientists is the ideal for humanity. He says they should not be used as a case study for what happens when scientists are given unregulated control, thus telling us that the purpose of Vault 4 was to give the scientists unregulated control, and claims that hybridizing humans with radiation-resistant animals still has potential. The door bursts open, everything goes flying, both scientists in the room, I assumed the other one was Mrs. Hawthorne, are eaten off screen, and then a gulper appears, stares at the recorder for a few moments, then eats it. Overseer Benjamin is clearly upset at this, and Lucy says she doesn't understand. Cult Lady says Vault-Tec lured people into the vault, and the doctors were just trying to ease their pain. Benjamin says that the gulper was his great-uncle Peter, which raises another question. That gulper was a mutated human, so was the gulper on the surface killed by Maximus, a mutated human too? Were multiple people mutated into gulpers, and then those that escaped just started breeding? Was the one on the surface Peter? What about the one in the suspension tank? Given that Ghoul Howard identified it as a gulper from stepping in its poo, it must mean there are multiple of them on the surface, yet we have only seen one body of water large enough to contain them, excluding the sea of course, and given the every single camera angle shot of Vault 4, there's no way to tell how close it would be to the sea. Regardless, Lucy is obviously shocked and says 33 is not like that, and to be fair, from her perspective it's not. Benjamin asks what the experiment in 33 was, and she says there isn't one, which does coincide with what we have seen thus far. 33 didn't know what 32 found out about management, and everything is so subtle that nobody would know. Benjamin defers to Cult Lady, who says that ignorance is not an excuse. She has brought violence into the vault and must pay the price. Lucy is dragged off with a bag over her head, right past Maximus's room. What are the chances? It takes him a whopping 12 seconds of staring out of his window and at his popcorn to decide to do something in order to save the one person in the whole world who can lead him to the technology that he can use to return to the Brotherhood with in order to get praise and dismiss his part in the death of Titus because he's an idiot. And before springing into action and after making his decision, he pauses to stuff a few last kernels of popcorn into his mouth. Because funny. Anyway, enough of that, because we go now to Thaddeus and his smushed foot, who has presumably been walking all day and has arrived at a Red Rocket petrol station. He is still dragging the weapons bag, and the dog is trying to stop him. He takes a seat, takes off his boot, and we get to see that having a power armor stomp on the foot does not in fact crush it. Deciding that he cannot keep walking like that, he takes Hedzig, the fusion core, and dumps the dog and the weapons. Minor issue with this scene is that the actor either forgot he was not directed correctly when lifting the dog, as he moves his right foot as if it's just fine. I have lifted large dogs before, so perhaps it was simple that it just would have been too difficult to do and act like he has broken his foot, in which case they could have just zoomed in order to hide it. Anyway, interlude out of the way, we go back to Vault 4 with all the dwellers chanting and clapping their hands while seated, with Cult Lady leading the proceedings. Lucy is bound with straps to a table. Cult Lady says Vault 4 is a place of peace and tolerance. It doesn't matter where you come from, you deserve safety. Poor Lucy was just not tolerant enough of their unreasoned demand to not go to level 12, or of their cultist activity of drinking a probable blood substitute while praising Lee Moldava. Well, Overseer Benjamin comes up and gets a rather ornate sword, sound effects inserted to make it sound sharp, and reads her charges. Causing harm to a fellow survivor. She is sentenced to death by banishment to the surface, which she was going to go to anyway. He then tries to cut her binds, the camera angle and dialogue insinuating a sexual act, because jokes, people. Laugh at the funny Cyclops man and the innuendo. Anyway, everybody gets up and cheers at the circus performance. Lucy is understandably confused with the theatrics, and Benjamin tells her that she will be undoubtedly killed instantly by who knows what, which is funny, given that she is then given 2 weeks of supplies. Hey, look everyone, he's an idiot. Isn't that funny? Because Lucy's already been on the surface for around a week, mostly by herself, and has managed to not die. The closest she got was Ghoul Howard using her as bait and letting her get heavily irradiated, ignoring of course the 8 rads a second she was soaking up or having sex with her new raider husband in Vault 33. That would have killed her, but hey ho. And Ghoul Howard dragging her off to organ harvesters. It's almost like the surface is not dangerous at all. Lucy then goes to plead the case for letting Maximus stay in the vault, intercut with scenes of him taking their fusion core. The lights go out, backup power comes on, and we have Maximus in full power armor striding forward with purpose to rescue Lucy. He bursts onto the scene, starts bodying guards, upturns a popcorn table, hurls a Nuka-Cola machine, which smashes the supplies, and only stops when Lucy stands in front of him. Once again we have Maximus trying to be heroic and trying to do the right thing, only for it to turn out to be a misunderstanding. In this case, a deliberate, theatrical misunderstanding, but with the same outcome. Maximus is still an idiot. He apologises because the writers had to insert another joke at his expense. The pair leave and they have an argument over the fusion core. Lucy says the vault needs it to continue. Maximus says he needs it to run the armour. She guilt trips him. He drops the core back down their capture chute, and now there is a very valuable suit of T-60 power armour just standing right outside of the very obvious Vault 4 for any scavenger to come along and pick up. Lucy tells Maximus that he would be welcome back at their vault, and gives a little detail about her failed marriage, with the implication that once the adventure was done with, they could both return to 33 and live together. Maximus uses this as a chance to tell her his real name, and explains that Titus threatened him, so he watched the knight die and took the armour. Still, they reconcile, agree to live together and carry on. I must say, at this point in the show, it does seem to suffer from tonal whiplash. On the one hand, we have a story about the evils of Vault-Tec and how they were near enough handing out vaults to run unethical experimentation, which resulted in populating the local area with monsters. Then comes a sex joke. Then back to a vault with a blood cult that worships the woman who slaughtered Lucy's friends and family, and the threat of her own execution, only for it to be a joke. And Maximus tossing people around in an attempt to save her, then apologising. I can't tell if the show wants to be serious about the story of a young woman leaving her home to find her kidnapped father, facing the challenges of a world vastly different to her own, or a light-hearted romp with jokes and quips every few minutes. Anyway, back to the show. We get a panning shot of yet more destroyed buildings in the sands with a voiceover from a DJ. Following a line in the sand, we once again have Thaddeus and his busted foot making his way somewhere. Another shot, this time of Mr. Chicken Man getting ready to blow his own brains out, presumably for having a chicken sex fetish, not being able to earn money, or both. Either way, Thaddeus has just teleported right in the centre of his vision, as the previously established wide shot showed that he was not there. This gives Mr. Chicken Man motivation to not kill himself, and so off he runs after Thaddeus, offering his skills as a doctor. The next scene has a confusing time of day. It appears to be sundown as the sky is quite red, and the scene before was not at night. Yet when the pair arrive at Mr. Chicken Man's supplies, it is back to being around the middle of the day again. Regardless of that, Thaddeus takes off his boot to show his mashed foot. Mr. Chicken Man says he's seen the condition before, because he is a quack. And Thaddeus says someone stepped on it. This is another one of those jokes, so laugh again. Mr. Chicken Man goes to his marketing spiel, to which Thaddeus aims a gun at him and threatens to kill him. Mr. Chicken Man says that if he were killed, Thaddeus would not know what drugs help and what ones hinder. Given how Vault-Tec sold family-size cyanide bottles, it's not outside the realm of possibility that indeed many things on the shelf could be hazardous. Thaddeus relents and Mr. Chicken Man asks for a fee. Without any caps, Thaddeus offers up a fusion core instead, presumably by taking the idea of giving up a tech to a man who cannot use it in exchange for returning to the Brotherhood as a hero being a good deal. Chicken Man quickly whips up a concoction claiming to heal all, hands it over, and Thaddeus inhales it. Amazingly, given what we have seen of the Chicken Man thus far, the concoction causes Thaddeus' foot to pull itself back together, with even new skin rapidly growing over the exposed muscle. With his foot repaired, Thaddeus asks where a nearby radio tower is for him to use to contact the Brotherhood. The Chicken Man points him towards Shady Sands, which Thaddeus says is radioactive as hell. But he is countered by the Chicken Man, saying he no longer has to worry about that. Two problems with this, unfortunately. One, Thaddeus was just in the region of Shady Sands, as that is where Lucy's tracker that she stuffed up Headsig's nose led them through prior to their stint in Vault 4. And two, if it's so incredibly radioactive, how were Lucy and Maximus able to stand on the edge of the crater without her Pip-Boy going off? Granted, her Pip-Boy is a plot device and only seems to go off when being looked at, but that is not how Geiger counters work in the first place. Anyway, this means that Thaddeus has to backtrack all the way he's just come from, and close to the point where he thinks Maximus will be, as he has no idea that Lucy let Maximus out of the power armor. With that, we pop back to Vault 33, with the raiders begging for food and Norman still on delivery duty. We presumably get a quick cut over 2 or 3 days, it's unclear exactly how many, as you have him delivering and then cut to him entering with a full trolley and delivering again. We get Norman delivering again on the next day, only this time the raiders are getting wheeled out, with Woody and Betty in the cell, and the raiders all dead. Betty says the medic thinks it was rat poison in their food, but they will find out who was behind it, with the cell warden being dragged away by security under suspicion of being the poisoner. Woody, for his part, looks just as confused as Norman in all this. Betty tells Norman that she said words had meaning, instantly making her suspicious. And Woody says that people are going to get upset at this. Betty says people like to have something to fuss about. She then sets up the vault assignments, and wouldn't you know, Woody has been assigned to Vault 32, presumably to get him out of the way. Also going to 32 are Chet and Stephanie. Chet being someone who knows a bit too much, and Stephanie being from 31. Norman goes to see them both and has a quick chat with Chet, asking if he's going to forget everything that's happened. Chet says it's a good chance to start over, to which Norman calls him a coward. Chet corrects him, saying they are all cowards, as that's why they live in a vault. Now, my theory here is that Betty arranged for the raiders to get poisoned. She has the means and the motive to do so, being the de facto leader of Vault 33. It was the council, of which she was a part, that did not want Lucy to leave to find Hank, as it gave them all a chance to grab for power. The broken water chip was an excuse to eliminate the raiders, so as to maximise what reserves they had left. Norman on food duty was her idea, so she could arrange for rat poison to be put in their food, and she had the perfect patsy just sitting on guard duty to accuse of the crime. And, of course, she can keep the last McLean close for potential future political use, and to ensure that he does not cause trouble. Finally, with the reassignment program, she can pick and choose who gets to stay in 33, and who can be removed to another vault, separated from causing any more trouble for the next 3 years. I give that a hearty thumbs up for storytelling, without having to beat the viewer over the head. Back outside now, and we have Ghoul Howard arriving at the petrol station, seemingly tracking Thaddeus by his damaged foot. Hearing the dog, he goes and pulls it out of the vending machine, and that scene is done. We're back in the past again with Cooper Howard mulling over the idea of bugging Barbara's Pip-Boy. He syncs it up, but her entrance causes him to move away from the device. He looks at her, at the dog, and then decides he should not spy on his wife, and so throws the bug away. Advance time to that night with Barbara in bed and Cooper watching the Vault 4 advert. Clearly he is still troubled, and after a few moments goes to the garbage to retrieve the bug. With the interlude out of the way, we are back again with Ghoul Howard sitting with the dog. The show clearly trying to parallel the old Cooper with his dog, with the new Ghoul Howard with his. Ghoul Howard calls the dog dog meat, because reference. Clap! Clap, people! They said the thing! Maybe next day, maybe the night before, I don't know. We're back with Lucy and Maximus as they walk across the desert and towards a ruined building. We move on from them, however, to Thaddeus at the KPSS radio station, thanking the DJ for letting him use the radio. The two make small talk about music, with Thaddeus clearly not knowing what he's talking about, before moving on to talking about the booby traps, as the camera pans out to reveal several dead bodies caught up in comically large traps. Have another joke, I guess. The DJ sighs and calls them critics. This tells us that the radio station has been broadcasting for years. All these traps have been set up, and the DJ would rather sit on the radio station and stare at decaying corpses with all their associated smells and diseases than remove them from the traps and reset them when somebody else turned up. 2 jokes for the price of 1. The DJ points and asks if Thaddeus' ride has arrived, and we shift to Lucy and Maximus walking up the road. Thaddeus panics and draws his pistol, unloading the entire clip and missing every single shot. If only he had a scope, he laments. Oh, what a wacky and zany world we have. Lucy and Maximus put their hands up and step forward, exclaiming that they just want the head. Thaddeus takes a step back and sets off a crossbow trap hidden in the boot of a car, which managed to perfectly levitate the bolt a good foot or 2 from the starting point before going through his neck, perfectly level. The bolt should have hit him in the body if you look at the previous scene, but that way we would not have had a shot of Thaddeus pulling the bolt out of his neck and the wound healing afterwards. Maximus deduces that Thaddeus might be a ghoul, telling us that yes indeed, in this show ghouls have hyper-regeneration powers but can still be killed by shoulder wounds. Somehow. But not neck wounds. Anyway, Thaddeus laments trusting the Chicken Man and says he should have known better than to trust a man who smells, only for 3 vertibirds to appear over the horizon. Thaddeus panics, but Lucy does not understand as she thinks the Brotherhood are the good guys. Thaddeus says that they are complicated, and Maximus offers to take the head so that Thaddeus can get away. Previously we knew that Thaddeus hated ghouls, but I don't recall any indication from anybody else that destroying ghouls on sight was a standard Brotherhood practice. Maximus picks up another head and smashes its face in, handing Hedzig off to Lucy and telling her to go find her dad, and then they kiss. But it's never the wrong time for a joke, so they just have the 2 decapitated heads positioned to look like they're kissing too. Lucy rushes off, telling Maximus to find her in Vault 33, without telling him where Vault 33 is, but then again, it does have a very big door right out in the open. Speaking of 33, that's where we jump into next, with Betty doing a leaving ceremony for those being relocated to 32. Woody decides he's not going, but Vault security, probably under Betty's orders, have other ideas, so he goes back in line. Betty announces Stephanie Harper as the overseer of 32, ensuring that, as with 33, someone from 31 is in charge. One oldies song plays as everybody says their goodbyes and walks into 32, with Norman leaving before the end. He makes his way to the overseer office and hacks his way in. He starts a communication with 31, pretending to be Betty and asking to return. Quite concerningly, and playing into the sinister atmosphere, the person on the other end asks if they are compromised. So Norman plays along and gets told to head to 31 immediately, which of course he does, with nobody spotting him on the way, presumably due to either the numbers being too small or everybody else being off screen and so not existing. There is seemingly no external console for 31, and after a bit of waiting, the door opens by itself. Nobody hears the sound of the door echoing down the hallway because, once again, they are off screen and do not exist. And so Norman enters the mysterious Vault 31, with the door closing behind him. Who is there? What will he find? Nobody. The vault appears completely empty. The mystery deepens. Who are the High Council that Betty mentioned during the recent ceremony? Where are the people the overseers keep getting picked from? The tension heightens as there is a noise from ahead. Norman advances to investigate and finds... well, we'll just have to wait until the final episode to find out. A much better ending cut, if you ask me, than the past 2 episodes. The credits roll and we get a pan out of Griffith's Observatory, sponsored by Vault-Tec, curiously with a crashed vertibird next to it and a dead Brotherhood Knight inside. I feel that this episode is very much a mixed bag and thus deserves a 5. The pre-war scenes are still quite good, although the idea that a monopoly of cold fusion power being considered not profitable enough to sell to an energy-deprived world, and thus massive buyouts being organised to ensure that it is shelved, does strike me as nonsensical. Sure, Vault-Tec would not be able to make as much money selling the idea that the end is nigh, and only their products can provide peace of mind and security against the apocalypse, but they would be able to set the price at whatever they wanted for a near unlimited energy source, and become a global monopoly, making all of the money. The ongoing story within Vault 33 and now 31 is being played along quite nicely, with connecting the dots to determine that Betty is not all she presents herself to be, and while, yes, a half population after the raider attack means they no longer have a healthy breeding population, Hank already told everyone back in episode 1 that they would all be able to return to the surface within a generation, meaning that technically they don't need one. Downsides, however, far too many jokes just thrown in during what are supposed to be serious moments. The continued instances of characters teleporting into scenes and stopping existing ones out of them. Next time, YouTube's protected mode willing, I will get to grips with the final episode, followed by an attempt to collate the story into something short and manageable, plus all the lore contradictions I have seen. By that time, Season 2 might just be around the corner, so until then, toodles!